Hi. So today we have someone whom I'm so excited to have on this podcast. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the business. So a Hindustan Times, Forbes, Quora, Yahoo has had an amazing career trajectory. So has turned businesses around, has set up India operations, has a doctorate to his name. And so join me in welcoming someone whom I'm going to say, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kavitta. Hi, this is Gurmit here. Like Kavita said, I head the APAC operations of Quora. I'm based in Mumbai, and I'm looking forward to chatting and learning and also sharing what I know with all of you.
Great, super. So it really is an honor to have you here, Gurmeet,
Thank you,
and
Kavita.
thank you for taking the time out to do this. Right at the very start, I'm going to say that when we speak with students, we talk about things like punctuality, we talk about things like attention to detail, we talk about following it up till it happens. And Gurmeet, you have showcased these things in every sphere of my interaction with you. So I have to say that I'm starting this almost like a fan moment of saying, this is what success looks like, and this is what are some of the things that a person does no matter what level they reach in their career. So tell me a little bit more about this.
I think it's an interesting question, and a lot of it for anyone, goes back to how you were like brought up. It goes back to how your parents were, and therefore how your life story has been so far. So one of the key things in my childhood was that I studied in a Sainik school, which
Okay.
is an army school. So obviously a lot of discipline, punctuality, and therefore follow ups and all that you mentioned kind of originated from there because we were taught the importance of that, and we kind of followed up on that. So from class 6 to 11, I was in Sainik School. So every state in India has one Sainik School
Right.
whose mission is to send, prepare and send the students to the National Defense Academy.
Correct.
So I was there in the one in Andhra Pradesh, which is near Vishakhapatnam.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Sainik School Korukonda.
Okay.
So I studied there, and I owe a lot of what I am today to the school, to the teachers out there, and to my colleagues and friends out there.
I think that's the loveliest compliment anyone can give a teacher when you remember them so fondly after so many years and going back and honestly saying, I am what I am today because I learned what I did in my formative years.
Absolutely.
So tell me some interesting incidents that you remember from your school life, from your college life, uh, the top three that come to your mind.
So school life, my primary school, um, I was kind of raised in Hyderabad. So my primary school was St. Patrick's in Hyderabad.
Okay.
It's a Catholic school.
Yes.
So what I remember of the school is, there were a lot of English speaking students in the sense, Christians and others. So I think I learned a lot of language out there, both spoken as well as written,
Mhm.
very early on in life. And that kind of helped me as I went ahead as well, because learning languages and being good at them helps you kind of, communicate even better.
Yes.
So that was with St. Patrick's. Then I moved on to Sainik School, where, like I said, discipline kind of, came in out there.
Yeah.
The other thing which I also learned in school was early on was, some amount of leadership exposure.
Okay.
So when you're in a boarding school, you have some assignments like a house captain or a class prefect or things like that. So I was the house captain of my house, and later another house. So that gave me the early exposure to, some kind of leadership skills, management, people management, and all of that, which again I kind of go back to those days whenever even in my current scenario, when there are a few situations, it helps me remember those days. And I'm grateful that one had a kind of a journey that had, Sainik School in that. And after that was the usual college.
Yes.
In college, typically, I remember, one, of course, you had your usual book. So I did my engineering in mechanical engineering from Osmania University.
Okay.
My memories of college are more in terms of, apart from the usual textbooks that are there, I would enjoy reading some reference books, which is something, again, as a concept that helps me in my life even today, which is that, of course, you have certain given resources and certain given things which are, available, but can you go beyond them? So that learning I have from college.
And these things are all timeless because
Absolutely.
today also, when I work with the students or I'm having a discussion with the parents, often we talk about taking additional responsibility in school, making yourself more visible in that setup, and also going beyond your academic books, expose the students to reference books. And now, of course, knowledge sharing is available so easily in bite-sized modules. It's so accessible. It's just to create that willingness in the student that I think is the sole responsibility of a teacher plus a parent to find that inquisitiveness to go beyond the academic textbooks.
Absolutely, Kavita. I think it is those traits that you need to develop. And if you have those traits in you, if you have that urge in you, irrespective of how times change, how technology changes, you just adapt yourself to that. The core values, remain the same.
I could not agree more with you, actually. Um, so then I come to this other question, which I've been pondering about a lot. Today, all top company CEOs around the globe, of course, in India, people like you are leading this country, but even around the globe, we are being led by Indians in all, I would not say all, but a large number of CXO positions that was not in the past. Now, these people are all in an age bracket where they studied in the Indian traditional schooling system. However, one of the most popular questions I get hit with by parents today is which board to choose? Should we choose an international board? Should we choose an Indian board? What are the merits? What are the demerits? If all the top successful people were schooled in the old Indian schooling system, do we need a change? And if we need a change, in your opinion, why do we need that change?
So I think schooling, as I said earlier, what is important to is to develop trades. Boards, of course, are important,
Yes.
but what is more important than that is, what kind of a school are you going in? What kind of teachers are there? Like, for example, if you were to invest in startups, right? What do you look at? Apart from the concept, you look at who the founders were,
Yes.
right? So similarly for schools, you would look at, what kind of teachers are there, what kind of discipline is there, how far is it from your place. So schooling, these things are, in my opinion, more important than the board, because boards change from state to state, and also, like you said, there are CBSE and IB boards and all.
Yes.
Sometimes, there are certain boards which are more expensive and schools are more expensive. So that, according to me, is like secondary. Going to a good school close by, which has like, good teachers, good values, is more important in life to kind of, get started. So that is one. What is more important later on as you go to middle school is identifying your interests, right? So, do you want to do social sciences? Do you want to do arts? Do you want to do design? Do you want to do engineering? Or do you want to do medicine? Whatever it is, or law. There are like multiple careers which are there. That is where, making a choice becomes very, very important.
So, would you say in today's new world, being interdisciplinary in your choice is a great way to go forward? Because the way careers are merging, the way technology is allowing fields to cross connect that wasn't available earlier, Do you think a interdisciplinary approach is more appropriate for today's world, or do you think the discipline you get by studying a singular career and then a singular subject, and then later in your career sort of becoming interdisciplinary, that is a better approach? What do you feel about that?
So what's happening today, Kavita, is that knowledge is now getting democratized.
Yes.
Like I work for Quora,
Yes.
and Quora's mission is to share and grow the world's knowledge.
Yes.
Similarly, you have lots and tons of now you have AI and bots that kind of give you more information. You have search tools that give you a lot of information. So there is plethora of information which is there, which kind of equips you with more and more knowledge. So what is important is having the right value system, having the right attitude of, let's say, asking questions, and having that knack of connecting concepts with what you're studying. Like if you're studying XYZ, let's say social sciences, how does that connect to real life? How does that connect to maybe a work life? So that kind of connect is more and more important. So my own personal thought is that early on, the schooling should be like maybe a set pattern like we have. But somewhere down the line, interdisciplinary becomes very important because then you get exposed to a few other disciplines, and that helps you choose what is the one which you are a better fit.
Yeah, yeah. So as you mentor people in your career, and I'm sure you lead large teams, etc., what is the one skill you look for in a person which sort of makes you identify them as, within a team, this one is a self starter, or this one will go further, or I see this one quality in a person which makes me sort of want to mentor them, guide them more? What is that one thing that you look for, or is there more than one thing that you look for?
If it were one thing, I would look at the drive the person has. So people who have drive, normally ask a lot of questions. They go beyond their role. They come up with solutions. So everything is kind of dovetails into that. If you have the drive, and if you think you're not kind of working, but you're like it's your own thing which you're doing. You're like within a particular role. You're like an entrepreneur, and that kind of makes you kind of ask questions, find solutions, get people together, and believe in the overall objective rather than one particular thing. Okay, my job is to do this was written in the JD, so I'm going to do this 1 2 3 4, and not kind of beyond that. So we have people like that as well.
Right.
But then there are people who kind of go beyond that as well. So that is the key thing in my opinion in terms of drive. When we hire people, one, of course, we look at if it is a particular function, if it requires a hard skill.
Correct.
Or experience, is that there or not? The other thing which we look at is how comfortable are you in a team scenario? And that is where I think finding the right school or college is very important, spending time there, because how do you do projects in school, in college? These are things that set the foundation for teamwork as you kind of, go on to work.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, I think the era of being a generalist is over. You have to have a specialized skill set to perform. You must also have the ability to be collaborative, to work within teams, and that hunger in the belly to achieve something that is beyond sort of what is mandated in your JD, like you said. Now, a follow up question from that. Today, parenting has become about making it comfortable for the child, right? As parents, and I use this term, that we bubble wrap our children so much that we don't want them to feel any issue at all. We don't want them to feel the heat. We don't want them to feel the pain of failing in an assignment. We don't want them to feel the dirt on their hands. We don't want them to feel, so we love our children so much that we're bubble wrapping them. Is this bubble wrapping actually causing that hunger to achieve or that fire in the belly to diminish? Or you think the person who has it has it?
Bubble wrapping is a very interesting term you've coined. It's got me thinking. So, as parents, let's look at that. We are probably, better equipped than in terms of surroundings, knowledge, current, circumstances, and all of that. Maybe, more than what our parents were.
Mhm.
So, they were, obviously better than their parents in terms of knowledge and other scenarios. And, the current set of parents are more equipped, thanks to so much information being available and all of that. So bubble wrapping early on is fine because, the child is looking for that security, guidance, and all of that. In fact, on the contrary, uh, we often hear of stories where, there are like some parents who don't have enough time to bubble wrap,
Mhm.
right? So that's another side of it. So in my opinion, if you're getting bubble wrapped early on in your life, you're very lucky.
Okay.
So, and you must kind of, appreciate that. The problem happens when that bubble wrap kind of continues later on in your life,
Mm.
where let's say the child grows into, his or her teens and then has a mind of, his or her own, and they have like a lot of access to knowledge, thanks to search, social media, AI, and all of that. And they start having, uh, opinions of their own, and they solve problems in a very different way.
Mm.
So how do we encourage, children to solve problems in a different way?
Mhm.
That is where, bubble wrapping should stop. And it is up to parents to kind of, find out uh, when should bubble wrapping kind of, stop.
Hmm.
Because let me give you an example.
Please.
Let's say there is a parent or parents who are like CXOs in a company,
Right.
right? So they know it all, right? So they are kind of guiding their children
Yes.
throughout.
Yes.
And the child is kind of grown and has a mind of his or her own. But the parents still feel okay, they can kind of, contribute,
Yes.
and they can still guide and all of that. So somewhere they should, step back, give the child the space to, find things on his or her own, and then find a path.
Mm.
And that's where I think briefly I did a startup between Yahoo and Quora,
Okay.
which was in the education space,
All right.
and which was to, democratize in a sense counseling for admission into, you know, high school and, colleges and all of that.
Okay.
So one of the things there was, how do you, instead of going by instinct, which most parents are, can we be a little more quantitative about it? Like, for example, psychometric tests.
Yes.
They are like, in my opinion, a very good tool, which a lot of parents don't utilize.
Yes.
So can can that be a tool which, parents can leverage? The other thing is mentorship. Like, for us, mentorship was, what your parents or teachers said. Formally, you didn't do any, you didn't seek any mentorship. But children now, since they have so much knowledge, and as they grow up, obviously you are in some way kind of a rebel, right? So they appreciate a third party knowledge, which is kind of, substantiated with some amount of data. So mentorship there becomes very important because a child is more likely to appreciate that opinion at a particular age compared to, what parents say.
So I want to promise all the listeners that Gurmeet and I have not had a conversation about the fundamental work that Head Start Mentorship does, but you have,
not aware of that.
but you have actually just spoken what the mandate of Head Start Mentorship is. So,
That's interesting.
so, so we use psychometric tests when a student comes in, with the caveat that a psychometric is a study of here and now of your learning cycle. As the student evolves, so does their learning abilities, their interest levels, Aptitudes are something that is sort of more static in the psychometric analysis, but your interest and learning cycles just keep developing as you keep evolving. So today, say your interest in physics is really low because you don't enjoy the way the subject is being taught. And if I were to administer a psychometric, say a year later, when you have a different teacher or you've started doing lab experiments, you could see an exponential spark in a subject that was seeming different. Uh, but when you talk of a student saying, I want to be an architect, and the psychometric shows a spatial skill that is not fundamentally very strong for you, then one of the things as a mentor is your job to tell them that, sure, you can still do it, but be aware that the effort it will take to develop that skill will be higher than maybe, say, communication skills, which might already inherently be a very strong spark for you. So,
Absolutely.
so psychometric we use a lot in our approach, but I add another thing to that, and it's called a deep dive form, where we ask students, what is the last video you've watched? Or would you want to be an entrepreneur, or would you want a job in Google? Or would you want an NGO, or would you want to be a Fortune 500 company? You know, sometimes students themselves, when they sit down to reflect on these answers, they come up with things that are revelations to themselves. It's a revelation to the family. I've had pure STEM students come up and say, but, maybe I want to do a baking course. And, that there's a moment of silence all, all around the table. But then that's a great opening for a child to A, self realize, and then B, for you to have honest conversations about what a different career trajectory those two completely different paths can take. So I am so glad to hear this from an industry stalwart that obviously we're doing something right at Head Start
No,
Mentorship.
absolutely. In fact, you said it so well that psychometric test alone is not the only thing we should refer to. Any particular test,
Yes.
whether you're at work or at school and all, always need to be interpreted. And I think that's where, let's say HR in a company comes into play, or, experts in that particular field come into play. And in schools, like, for example, possibly, mentors or teachers could come into play, where they kind of interpret what they see of the student, what the psychometric test says. And like you said, there could be many colors to that, many shades to that, which have to be taken into account. But the best part, it gets people going.
Yes.
Half the time, you come across parents who are like just stuck, like, or children who are stuck, more importantly. And children are like, what should I do? And, there are enough cases where, there's a group of friends you have and all of them decide to do the same thing,
Yes.
kind of a thing.
It's very true. But also in middle school, early years of high school, I actually say they are not supposed to know. They are not supposed to have all the answers. I mean, you and I, as professionals, are constantly pivoting in our interest levels. We develop those skills if we want to go after those. So, why should a child of 13 or 15 know that this is the one path I want to work on or walk on? And I'm quite happy for students to actually explore and then sort of say, okay, this is for me, this is not for me, this is for me, this is not for me. And
I
I
couldn't
think,
agree more with you.
yeah.
Where I'm referring to is like after class 10, you need to
Yes.
choose, right?
Yes.
So those are the times when, everyone kind of, wakes up to a discussion.
Yes.
There's like pressure in the family to,
Yeah.
figure out. So that's where you need some discussion, some clarity.
So tell me, what has your parenting approach been? What is sort of been your style of parenting when it comes to giving your child advice about career, about profession, about all these fundamental skills that we've been talking about?
Uh, Initially, definitely bubble wrapping.
Okay.
I think that is something, that's the love and guidance which, any child deserves.
Yes.
So that definitely helps because it makes a child emotionally strong, also more confident. And that sets up for the later years, let's say after 10th and all. So after let's say class 10, you have to start enabling your child.
Mm.
So how can you be an enabler? How can you just basically share, okay, these are the options which are there. This is a great video, this is a great book. Uh, Encourage your, children to have somebody they are inspired, you know, from. Children, obviously, every child has some source of inspiration, somebody maybe in the family or maybe outside who kind of inspires them at whichever stage. It could be at a later stage and all. Encourage them to, know more about the person that inspires them. And that kind of, opens up a lot of doors. So I would kind of, do that. Uh, make Enable things is what I would say.
So that's leading me up to another question that I want to ask you. So you're completely right. Students get inspired by what they are exposed to. In our generation today, social media, and especially short form social media, has become a big source of direction that, generally the children, students, teen, youth is taking. Now, that short format has made success seem so easy to come by, right? Nobody talks of the 20 years of hard work, 7 attempts behind it. Everyone talks of this instant fame. And, recently we had Diljit perform this whole concert across the country. And he actually addressed this when he said, people say, I've become famous, but I've been doing this for the last 20 plus years. And it's now that I have become famous. And you hear of all these startup stories, and you hear of people dropping out of colleges and setting up these big ventures and getting big funding. So success visibly has become very easy. Is that really true? And if not, what are some of the fundamental things that students need to do to become successful? So, before the long question, a short one question. How many hours a day do you still work, Gurmeet?
Number of hours is sometimes, while it is supposed to be a quantitative thing, but becomes like a subjective thing. Like, for example, I'm at home and my wife is talking to me and I'm like thinking something about work. And she's like, why are you not listening to me? And so that's, I'm at work in a way. Sometimes you end up carrying work home depending on what the circumstances are. So, for example, there's an annual review, there's a quarterly review, or there's something coming up, some event coming up. So you end up, thinking about it for long hours. But more important than the number of hours, Kavita, what I think is how disciplined are you? Like, when do you start your work? Like, do you start it like as and when you feel like, or do you start it like 9 o'clock every day or whatever time, every day? In my opinion, having a good start time to work is very, very important, because then that sets the discipline for the momentum. The other thing is, how do you work? Like, I know there are a lot of people who would, possibly take breaks or too many breaks, go out and all of that. So how focused are you while at work? As you travel, if you work for a global company, as you travel across countries, you suddenly find that work cultures are very different. I was in Yahoo, I was at the Hong Kong office one day, and like people were there dot on time, and they were like hugely focused on work. Nobody was kind of, chatting, and very focused on their work. Team meetings were happening in conference rooms, and lunch break, people went out, came back, and they took a small nap, which was very unique, like a power nap.
Okay.
And then they started work again.
Right.
So the point being that it is very important on how focused you are at work, how concentrated you are at work, how are you managing your time. So how do you manage your time? I'm like, there are so many courses and case studies on time management, and it's such an important thing. That I think is very, very important. Discipline, time management, and your concentration at work.
And so, is success as easy as social media makes it out to be?
Look, success is never easy. Even if a person uh, has succeeded as a startup,
Right.
so let's say a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old as startup is like really done well, and he's on top of the world, he's become a billionaire or whatever. But it's not easy. Like he's not like just relaxed and things have happened on their own. You take any global case or Indian case, people work throughout. If you ask them how many hours they work, I mean, like, you'll be surprised. They just, because it is their own venture, right? Their own money is at stake, their own prestige. There's so much more at stake for them than a person who's, let's say, working for another company.
Hmm.
So the hours they put in are like crazy. The hard work they put in is crazy. The passion they have is like crazy. So success may have come at an earlier age, but it's come at a lot of hard work.
Exactly. And not just corporate. I'd say if you're a painter, for example, and you have an art showing, now only if you have the pieces ready will you have the exhibition up. To have the pieces ready, you will have to put in that many hours painting to create it. So, going back that many hours means whether you start at 9 or you're nocturnal and you start at 9 in the night, the discipline of going back to your point of following a systematic approach to complete something is what is going to get those paintings ready, right?
Absolutely.
So, success. So, today I just want to bust this myth, that social media is promoting that work 3 hours a day, work, work, that it's just that without putting in the effort or the hard work, you're going to become successful. Fact is, it just does not happen like that.
No, I don't see any cases, who have succeeded by putting in like 3 hours a day. It has to be like long hours for sure.
Yes.
And it is only not only long hours by you, you have to inspire your team as well to kind of, be together. So work, in my opinion, is like a train.
Hmm.
Like it's not just the engine. Like you're running, you work 3 hours a day and you're sorted.
Right.
It's a train,
Right.
right? The train has to move at the same speed as the coaches and all of that. Like all the coaches and the engine have to move at the same speed. If you have somebody who's working 3 hours a day, you can't expect others to work 12 hours a day.
Correct.
The train will move at 3 hours a day only. So it is important not only to kind of work hard and kind of be disciplined and all, but also inspire that in your team.
So, I'm going to stop you there and say, do you think this is relevant in a family setup also? So, if a parent, for example, wants their child to achieve a lot, they must set that tone and example by doing those things themselves. Do you agree with
That's what's leading by example, right?
Yeah.
So it starts early on. It starts in school. It's not only parents, it's like teachers. Let's say you have a teacher who comes to the class and just reads from the textbook. You're not inspiring the student, like. But if there's a teacher who comes and shares more examples, then the student goes to the library, picks more books up, has a discussion with the teacher, and then kind of remembers them. Like even later on when the person succeeds, that's how you admire some teachers, maybe more than the others, because they led by example.
Right.
Similarly, parents, I'm like, if your parents are like, taking it easy, that will not inspire the kid.
Right.
So children are hugely inspired by what they see in their parent, whether it's your mom or dad or brother, sister, and that's a huge source of inspiration. And that goes on to work. Like as a leader, if you don't work, or if you're like, if you just delegate, like what we call excessive delegation, if you excessively delegate, people don't appreciate that.
So, a big takeaway for all the parents listening, for all those complaining that our children don't read, parents, pick up the books yourself and start reading and leading
Absolutely.
by example. Also, social media. So, a lot of parents are talking about the fact that our kids are constantly addicted to their phones. Set aside your own phones for 30 minutes
Absolutely.
and
You
lead by
have to lead by
example.
example. I mean, like, you can't be on the phone like always and then expect your child not to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I think this is like a great insight. And from a corporate conversation, everything that you do actually trickles down to the smallest bit. And a highly successful corporate makes the $1 billion and gets listed and gets the awards and all that. But a highly successful family brings out your children to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. And I think as a parent, that's all we aim for.
Absolutely. That's the circle of life.
Yeah, that's actually so true. Okay. So now tell me, now we are saying that you lead by example and children imbibe what they see around them. With the current Indian academic system and the current demands of, I'd say, this global workplace, because it's no longer contained by territory or geographical location or anything like that. Do you think there is anything missing or there are gaps that need to be filled between what students are learning in the academic system versus what they need in the professional world?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, there's definitely a disconnect to some extent. And let me talk about it. So, the big disconnect which I see is, the encouragement to ask questions. And so, if you're in a school, college, how much do you encourage the students to ask questions? How much do you go beyond the scheduled books, and how much do you, whatever you teach, how much do you connect that with context or like a real life situation? Let's say if you're explaining a term in mechanical engineering, are you able to link that to a factory and how that is kind of implemented out there? Or if it is a mathematics formula, can you link it to how it is used in data science or somewhere else? So linking a particular thing to a real life thing, like we always say, right? If you have a concept, if you put it in the form of a story, people understand it better.
Yes.
Similarly, principles or whatever you subject you have, if you link it to a context, to a real life situation, I think students will appreciate it better, get more engaged with it. Like we say in social media terms, what are the engagement rates and all of that? That pretty much that's how life is. If you can get your students more engaged, right now, I think students are primarily studying to, get the best jobs or get ahead of the rest,
Yes.
do well in life and all of that. But if you help them understand things better, then the meaning of life is a little more broader, which is where I think our education system can improve on, where our teachers can be more enabled.
Right.
And they could refer to more books, more examples, and go beyond the thing what is written in the textbook.
So, a straight shooting question. Will AI, which gives us access to a lot of knowledge, actually make the children think lesser? Or is it a double edged sword that can be used wisely to actually inculcate all these critical thinking, inquisitiveness, thirst for knowledge even more? What do you see happening in the next 5 years?
It is like what the calculator did to Vedic maths, right? We would remember tables and additions by heart and all. Now you have the calculator, you kind of go for it. So, like you rightly said, it's a double edged sword. It will obviously make things easier.
Right.
For information is available much easier, assignments can be done much faster, so things like that will happen. But again, like I said, information availability can be used in a very, very good way as well.
Right.
Your assignment can be 2x better than what it was maybe 10 years ago,
Right.
because you have access to more information and more resources. So it can definitely be leveraged in a good manner. You can obviously do some cross checks out there. Like the most common thing which people do with AI is you write a letter or a particular thing and just put it out there. It will give you in legal language, in the language which is correct.
Yeah.
Similarly, for law and all of that, you can just key in what you want. It'll give you like a contract and all. So it makes life easier. It depends on how you can kind of leverage it. If you leverage it well, then obviously, it is a plus.
It is a plus. I believe that, it's so people say it's the value of a human will get diminished with AI. I believe the role that the human plays will evolve in the teaching system with AI. So, what you need now are motivational coaches. What you need now are mentors. What you need now are guides, because you no longer need a teacher to give that information. Earlier, the teacher was the safeguard point or what information was disseminated to students. Now, students don't need to go to a classroom for a professor or a teacher to hand out information. That access has now been, like you said, democratized. But what I feel the role of guides, mentors, teachers, parents now will evolve to is igniting that spark, igniting that willingness to access that information, and training students to think out of the box with the information that they do have.
Absolutely.
So I feel a revolution will take place. Um, but at the same time, I think human minds will need to think differently to support this new way of education. Do you see that happening?
So let me just take a step back, go to AI.
Okay.
How does AI learn? Actually, AI learns from humans. Like
Correct.
you are interacting with AI. AI is learning from your questions and all of that. And you're saying, okay, this is not correct. Can you modify it like that? So it kind of gets to learn as well.
Right.
So think of AI as a mutual learning thing.
Okay.
Instead of like a one-way thing that it's just making your life like it's not a robot. Like
Right.
it doesn't pick up a thing here and just put it there replacing you.
Right.
It's like a interactive kind of a thing. It's learning from you as much as you're learning from them.
That's a very interesting perspective, actually.
Yeah, so think of it like that. Then the other thing is, like you said, how do you kind of use it? It can be used in many, many ways. And I think that will free time. Like we talked about time management a while ago, right?
Yes.
It can help time management in a great manner. Like, for example, if there is a leader who's leveraging AI, it frees a lot of time for strategic thinking.
Right.
Let me give you an example of healthcare.
Okay.
So there is an AI tool for healthcare, like a bot, which is developed by this company called Suki.
Okay.
There are many such companies, but
Yes.
let's talk of Suki. So Suki has this healthcare related thing, which you just, let's say, the doctors, it's on your phone, you put it in the pocket, you're talking to the patient, and you don't have to make notes because
They're
notes are already being
Yes.
made. So transcription is kind of happening. And not only that, because it is a medical bot, it's also kind of doing some basic interpretation and summarization.
Okay.
Right. So the doctor is able to focus a lot on the patient more. So isn't AI that way bettering your life?
Yeah.
I'm interviewing a candidate.
Right.
I don't have to make notes.
Right.
There is AI which is on the interview call along with me, and most companies use that now, including Quora.
Yes.
And that is making notes of the interview, and it gives you summary of one, the Q&A, and also the what the basic interpretation is. It just makes your life easier.
Correct.
So you've saved half an hour or 1 hour, not doing that, like which is like a repeat kind of a thing,
Yeah.
like you're summarizing that.
Yeah.
That time you can use it elsewhere.
Correct.
So it's just helping in many, many ways. Look at it like that.
Yeah. I actually could not agree more with you. And then pivoting from that, I would say the two key things we need to learn with technology and from each other would be communication, both written and spoken. Because now, if AI is going to judge me on the tonality or the emotional or the filler words that I'm going to use in an interview, and it's going to give that report, which a traditional human interviewer may not have put attention to or focused, but now that's going to be there. So I better learn to be a better communicator as I'm communicating with various stakeholders. And the second, I think, is collaboration, because we will all need to learn to collaborate with specialists, not just human, but also technological. Am I right in my?
And collaborate with AI.
Yeah, so we collaborate with technology,
Yes.
and we collaborate with specialists in the human form to
Absolutely.
actually create a better solution in that sense.
You're absolutely right. And if we go one step back, psychometrics,
Yes.
mentor, like psychometrics alone is not the answer. You need
Yes.
somebody to kind of interpret that. So that combination will always be required
Correct.
anywhere in life,
Correct.
at work, in school, at home,
Yes.
that is always there.
Correct. So, how important is communication in your opinion?
I'm like, communication is life.
I
If
love
you-
that line.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're not able to communicate well,
Yes.
or if you're not able to give context well, there's a huge likelihood that you would be misunderstood. The other thing is, you may not, it, particularly if it is cross culture, let's say, it makes things difficult if it is cross culture. So let me give you a real life example, particularly in global companies, where you're talking to or emailing people across countries, and cultures kind of vary. So typical Indian culture, or an Indian worker would typically write, okay, hello, this is pending, blah 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 blah. That is what a normal, to the point kind of a thing. There's nothing wrong in that. For ages we've seen that, right?
Yes.
But gradually you learn that you kind of start off saying that, hello, how are you doing today, how was your day, this is this, you give the full context. Once you give the context, then you ask the question, and then you put it. So don't assume any particular thing, give the context and then ask the question. So in communication therefore is very, very important, both verbal as well as written.
So I believe everybody has a story. It's the ones who know how to tell their story well, stand out in the crowd,
100%.
because everyone has a story, right? And
100%.
it's just, so I think one of the things that I look for to, to sort of contribute to the students that I work with is to explain to them the importance of communication, both verbal, written, and non-verbal. So a lot of times we miss this non-verbal part of communication, and often those are things that give us away. We may be saying a lot of the right words, we may be saying the right answers, but it's just how you show up and how how comfortable you are with your own story that makes the difference.
Absolutely. I think storytelling is a, while it's not storytelling as such in the sense, but how you kind of communicate.
Yeah.
How do you, let's say, I know very little about what you do, but in your opinion, how do you encourage, let's say, students to storytell?
So, storytelling, I think, is an art that you learn when you become comfortable with who you are. And once you're comfortable with that facet of yourself, then you work the hard work that you talked about. So, you work on better vocabulary, you work on dressing sharper, you make sure you're appropriate to the situation. You speak about things like tonality, you speak about things like good manners, something that the younger generation thinks is not a to do on every list. But there's nothing, like you said, set the context right. So if you're meeting someone for the first time, it's so important to say your hellos and your thank yous.
Yes.
So I think it's the broader picture of knowing your story. It's the mechanics of learning the art of doing it well. And then it's never forgetting the fundamentals like good manners and, show up well and sort of just believe in what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's well said. To add to that, I would also encourage children to, read those smaller books. like pocketbooks, which kind of increase your knowledge in a way without being like too overbearing. Like I remember in school, we had a subject called moral science,
Yes.
which doesn't exist anymore. But that,
well, let's hope morals exist. Moral science may have sort of
yeah,
changed.
correct. So, that would, talk a lot about civic sense and all of that. And earlier it was, elders who would have like a lot of experience and stories and narrative out of that. I think children could possibly do it by, doing more amount of reading, talking, watching some key things.
Yes.
If you're very comfortable with digital, there's so much you can read there.
Absolutely.
As
So again, very interesting. One of the new things that we have started in 2025 in Head Start Mentorship is these awareness workshops that we do once a month. So it's called Getting to Know the World Around You, and which is taking them outside their bubble of the bubble wrap and distilling information which is relevant to students. So it could be politics, it could be climate, it could be um, the stock market, it could be anything of consequence, entertainment, equality. So taking them through what's happened that month, encouraging them to read more about it, and then asking them to form opinions, critically analyze what's going on. So, giving them that spark to ignite. But I completely agree with you that awareness beyond your own self is so important. Another big term that is being talked about a lot these days is EQ. So, IQ, we do all this to develop, and emotional quotient. How important is that in your opinion?
I think that's a good development because while EQ was always there, it was never called out. EQ is very important because, like you said earlier, the aspiration of success has become like you can achieve it at a much earlier age as well. So, and it doesn't come easy, like you said. It requires a lot of hard work and all of that. Along with that, it also requires EQ, right? It's not important to just be intelligent or sharp or have a great idea and all. How do you kind of manage yourself, and also if you're doing it at a young age, how do you manage your team as well? And therefore it becomes very, very important. So therefore important, for a child or for an individual to figure out at an earlier age, if you're doing well on that particular front, and see all of that what we discussed in today's interview would, in my opinion, contribute in a very, very big way to EQ as well. So in my opinion, it is equally important as IQ. As today's world, it is all about teams. It is all about winning teams rather than winning individuals.
As a parent, can you think of an instance when you have helped your child through a difficult, trying time using EQ more than IQ?
There are many such occasions. So typically what happens is, when does EQ get tried? When you're at crossroads, where you're in a very challenging situation. That's where EQ is very, very important. So let's say there is a scenario where let's say my son's name is Angad.
Okay.
So Angad was, let's say, looking out for a job.
Okay.
Now, you obviously, you give interviews and all of that, and it's a long process. So he works in the US, and he's an Indian citizen. So typically, if you're, looking out for a job in the US, they prefer, people who are citizens out there. So therefore, there are no visa issues and sponsoring them and all. So it's relatively easier for them to kind of get in. Whereas if you're an international student, you need H-1B sponsorship and other things. So therefore, the opportunities are relatively lesser. So in such a scenario, you have to give, many more interviews and go through the entire churn for a longer period of time. That is a time where, a parent or anyone can give his EQ, where apart from what the person is doing, keep talking to the person like every day, like we would speak with Angad every day, figure out what's happening, identify, get into a Q&A mode, and iterate a few things and see how it is going. What is a better way out? And are we on track? Do we need to do a midway change? Discuss while the decision is that of Angad or the other person.
Right.
But as a parent, how are you kind of, enabling that?
Right.
And these situations come even in early school, in mid school, and other ways as well, where a child is confused, and you just need to sit down and just chat it through.
This is reminding me of an analogy that I read, that as a parent, your job is not to swim with your child in the ocean. Your job is to be that static rock that they can swim back to anytime they need to.
Yes.
And this incident just reminded me of that, because often, so this is where that term bubble wrapping that needed to get opened. So you're still that rock in that ocean, but that bubble wrap is gone for them to swim, to paddle, to race. But then if needed, they come back to you for that EQ, for that love, for that stability.
Yeah, I think that's what our values, our culture especially, teaches. In terms of family, how you're always there, for your children as much as they are there for you as well.
Yeah.
And it's such a mutually beautiful thing.
Correct.
Which is there, like you rightly said, of course you can swim back anytime. I mean, like that kind of goes without saying.
Yeah. Family dynamics are changing, Gurmeet. And, while this was, I wish this was true in every household, but I think across the globe, uh, these values are changing. And I think sometimes there is a need to revisit these. And whether a child is grappling with subject choices, or a child has lost a competition, or a child is choosing what subjects to take, or a child is not done as well as they wanted to, but it's all part of their journey. And one of the things I think as parents, we all need to know is not live our own expectations or our ambitions through our children. And knowingly, unknowingly, a lot of times we see that happening. So, in your opinion, and from a business point of view, let's say this happens in the business world also. In your opinion, what is that sort of alarm bell that should make parents stop and think about, am I there for my child? Am I not there for my child? Am I putting too much pressure on them? What's that alarm bell in your opinion?
It's an automatic alarm, in my opinion.
Okay.
You have to be a good listener. I'm like, the alarm bell may ring, but you may not listen. So the problem is the alarm bell, it's not with the alarm bell. The alarm bell rings. There are parents who don't listen to the alarm bell. There are parents who listen to the alarm bell. And there are parents who listen to the alarm bell yet add value to that,
Right.
कि मैं 1 घंटा और सो लेता हूँ.
Yeah. In the corporate structure, for a student just entering the workforce, what would you say are 3 alarm bells that they should look out for when choosing a career or a company or a job profile for themselves?
I'll give you a little context. I'll take a step back and maybe come to this question.
Okay.
So let's go to EQ. I'm like, most things what you see in your work life are kind of, in a way, reflection of your childhood and how you've been brought up.
Yes.
The values which you learn there help you in your work life as well. And I think especially parents must understand that. I'll give you an example.
Please.
Let's say in a work case scenario, you have, individual employees and you have managers. Right? I don't need to explain how it kind of works, right? So let's say you have a child who has relatively lower EQ because of whatever childhood has been, and you have a child with better EQ, who do you think would make a better manager? It's a no-brainer of sorts,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that's where, there are so many parallels actually you can draw between childhood, growing up, and your work life. And that's where parents have to think that it is very, very important that what the child is doing or grasping will also get reflected at work. So if it is in sync, it kind of, works out well. Now, coming to your question as to what are the alarm bells which are there, I would say that what are the things we look forward in an employee, which in today's scenario, given how things are changed, like because you said, we discussed earlier how generalists have gone. Like today, we find that there was a news piece I was reading, even Harvard MBAs are finding it difficult to, get work kind of a thing. But that's like one extreme kind of a thing. But the thing what people are looking forward to now, what companies are looking forward to now, and you see a lot of that more happening now, is that hard skill which you have. So it is very important to have a hard skill. Okay. Because then that will hold you in good stead. So it could be law, technical, it could be sales, marketing, but you need to have a hard skill which is there. So that is one thing, what I recommend and what we look for. The second thing is, how do you work in a team? I'm like, you may be an individual contributor, but how do you work in a team? Like, I'm like, do you keep aloof, or do you kind of mingle? Do you kind of support each other? Or are you like insecure about your stuff? Are you like willing to kind of go out of the way? So that is the second thing. And the third thing we look forward to is are you asking the right questions or not? Because problem solution can happen only when you ask the right questions. So if you see the interview process, it will have a lot of these hypothetical situations where we are looking forward to, what's the question the candidate is going to ask in such a situation. So we are typically checking for, is the person asking the right questions, or is he or she is just okay with whatever it is?
So I think that's another very interesting insight. So anybody applying for internships, applying for entry level jobs, or applying for any sort of integration with the workspace, remember, it's not just the answers you're giving, but it's also the questions that you're going to ask.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because every interview at the end will have, do you have any questions?
Yes. Yes.
So, there's a reason for that. It's just not courtesy.
Yes. And I think that's that point where a lot of students do not prepare for. I like this quote where I say you need to remember the 3 P's every time you're putting yourself out there for anything. One is prepare, the second is practice, and the third is also punctuality. So going back to your original, where I started by saying I'm amazed at how punctual and how deep dive and down to detail you are, but I think we've circled back to those almost
absolutely
same points.
Because life is a circle, actually. All these things kind of add up. In like personal life as well as professional life.
That's true. That's so true. Okay. Now that you've achieved so much in your life, does it leave you hungry for more? Are you looking to just sort of now take it easy? This is from the point of view of a lot of students now saying work-life balance, talking about how many hours a week should they be working, and things like that. So what is your personal take on it?
So my take on that is, are you hungry for more? Work-life balance and other things is a byproduct of that. So how hungry are you? How aligned are you to the mission of, let's say, the company you work for? Or how aligned are you for your startup? Or anything what you're doing in life, how aligned are you with that? If you're doing it just for the purpose of, basic stuff like money or something like that, then obviously your hunger is, to that extent limited. I'll give you an example of a basic job, like receptionist at a particular
Right.
place.
Right.
Receptionists can, whatever, just take calls, do this. Or I've seen receptionists that go beyond that as well, who kind of manage calendars, who do
Yes.
other stuff, who engage, who read, and all of that. So it depends on whatever, job you're doing, whatever you're doing, how hungry are you for that, and how aligned are you with that mission. If you're, like they always say, like, are you happy in your job? So, which effectively means how aligned are you with your job?
How do you find your passion?
It comes on its own. Life is amazing, how kind of, God has created is. It leads you, and it leads you to various choices.
Yes.
And how do you make the choices completely yours?
Yes.
Right? So you may have two jobs. One job is like really what you want,
Yes.
and one job maybe having the right work-life balance,
Yes.
which is more important for you.
Yes.
So it depends on what choices you make.
Absolutely. Because it's the choice you make is that one choice, but the consequences of that choice are what you live with then.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to work hard and take the hardest math in school, is one common thing that we sort of come across. Okay, don't work hard at the math now, but then don't expect to be a nuclear scientist or a physicist or a mathematician studying at one of the leading universities in the world tomorrow. So it's a choice you made about not doing the hardest
Absolutely.
math, but then you live with those consequences later.
Absolutely. So taking the same example forward, let's say you don't become a nuclear scientist, you become a salesperson.
Yes.
You still need that math,
Yes.
but you don't have it because you made a choice.
Yes.
So at every level, that choice becomes very important, and then you get stuck with that in a way.
But also, it's very interesting, Gurmeet, in the world that we're living in. It's in the earlier days, we made a choice and we lived with it. Today, the option to pivot, make a choice, learn something new, and then carry that forward exists, which is available to this generation and the generations to come, which is different than what maybe our parents' generation had, right? I think we are that cusp generation where we have learned to pivot and we are willing to learn. And we also come with the old values of the hard work and the commitment and the passion, um, and the just, getting our hands dirty with it. But I think the newer generation has a lot more options open and they have a lot more choices available to them. But again, you can't take away the fundamentals, which is going to drive the consequences of these choices.
Absolutely. I mean, like if you see my own life, my own career, I started working with FMCG, Marico Industries.
Yes.
That was my first job, which is into consumer goods, like, sales. Then I went into brands and that. Then I just changed my field. I went into music. So I worked for music labels for 10 years.
Wow, tell us a bit more about that.
So I worked with Sony Music
Okay.
for about 4 years and about 6 years with Music Today, which is a part of the India Today group.
Yes.
I was there with them for 6 years, heading that label.
Okay.
So I was in music for 10 years, so completely changed. So the point being that, if you want to get out of your comfort zone, if you want to try out something new, you can always do that. Those opportunities were always there in the past. Maybe they are much, much more, like you very rightly said, now. So it depends on what your drive is. And then after music, I changed again. So then I changed to the internet side.
Yes.
So it depends on completely your drive, your value systems, and how hungry are you to get somewhere, where you want to get, how hungry are you to get there?
Tell me three things that a student, so one of each, a student must watch. Since you said music, a student must listen to, and a student must read, in your opinion.
So I'll say probably only one thing. In my opinion, the most important thing, which was given my experience, what a student can do is, and I've said this earlier in this chat as well, is pick up somebody who inspires you and chat with that person if the person is a family member or somebody who's available to you, If the person is not available, you can watch videos of that person or read about that person, uh, or interact online or whatever, like in whichever way. Learn more about that person who inspires you, and that in turn will give you a lot of answers.
So, I have a student who is in class 9, very inspired by his grandfather. And sadly, his grandfather is suffering from a neurological disease. Let's not go into the details of that.
Sure.
As a result of that, this student in class 9 has developed a board game that helps patients suffering from similar degrees of that neurological issue to spend their time in a calm manner.
How
And
nice. How inspiring this is.
And this is a student who's working with Head Start Mentorship, and a student that I've personally mentored. And it started from that point of being inspired by his grandfather all his life. And he's in grade 9 and grade 10. So how old is he, right? But that led him to create a board game that he's now going to file a patent for.
Please convey my appreciation to the student and lots of love.
Yes.
This is so amazing.
Yes.
This is like a two-sided thing. Like, one is your family values and love for your family, and two, completely converting like into some kind of a solution in a way for the grandfather.
Yes.
So this is so amazing, and
And there are many such stories. So actually, Head Start Mentorship is that space where you can think out of the box, and then have someone hold you accountable to that idea to make it happen. Because we all have great ideas, but then we come back to that discipline and the hard work and meeting our deadlines and achieving those goals to make something happen. So that's the aim that Head Start does as a mentoring program for young students. So we build these foundational skills irrespective of the career, country, course you choose to study in later. So
that's so amazing. Wish you all the very best for that. I think it's now that I'm learning more about it, I'm like much appreciative of it.
Yes.
Wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much. I have really enjoyed this conversation.
So have I.
Yeah, and I've learned a lot, and I hope the parents and students watching this have taken away a lot of information that you've given out in your brilliant communication style.
Thank you so much. I hope it's useful for everyone.
Yes.
And thanks again for having me.
Thank you. It's been a complete privilege to have you here. Thank you.